Hello friendos, it's Bella from the Bookish Badger, and today I'm coming at you guys with my very first unhaul. Now this video has been a long time coming, and I will tell you why, because I reorganized my bookshelf and got rid of these books back in like November or December or January at the latest, and they've just been sitting on my bedroom floor for this whole time because I wanted to save them to film this unhaul and I just never got around to it till now. But I wanted to save them to film the unhaul because an unhaul is a different sort of video than I've ever had on my channel, and I thought it'd be nice to sort of have that cleansing, spring cleaning sort of energy on my channel. Plus, besides that initial batch of books way back then, I also cleaned my room a whole bunch during quarantine, and I got a lot more books out of that too, because when I went to clean my closet, I opened it up and I was like, hey, all these books, I haven't thought of you guys in forever, and I obviously don't care about you anymore because I haven't thought of you in that long. So y'all gotta go. It sounds so mean, but it was legitimately my thought process. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first book I have here is My Sister's Keeper by Jodi Picoult, and this one I picked up from a little free library in my town, and I was like, hey, I've heard the title of that and I think it's a movie also, must be good. You see where my logic failed in that. Just because I've heard of it, Bella, doesn't mean it's good. So anyway, I looked it up on Goodreads way later on and saw that it had like terrible reviews and a bad overall rating, and a lot of them were just like, hey, this book doesn't actually have good characters or plot. People just think it's good because it makes you cry, but really it's emotionally manipulative and it's not well written. And I was like, well, I don't want to waste my time on that. So that is why this one is gone. The next one I have here is actually a script. It is an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, the play by Jane Kendall. And funny story with this one, I auditioned for this play and I wanted to be familiar with the script before I auditioned because I really wanted to get a role in it. I wanted to be Lydia. I ended up being Mary, probably because I was the only person auditioned who had glasses. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, I wanted to read the script beforehand, so I ordered the script. Turned out to be the wrong script. Big brained move. Turns out that there are a bunch of adaptations of Pride and Prejudice as a play. Who would have thought? Not Bella back then. But anyway, I finally ordered the correct one. It was this one. And then once I got into the show, I obviously didn't need this one anymore because they gave me a play script, which is the one that I ended up highlighting and such. And so this one's nice and clean and pretty, so I figured it would be nice to be donated. The next one is called F for Effort. It is by Richard Benson. This one I picked up at a library book sale, and it's one that I had seen for a really long time in book catalogs like Boz Blue, and I always thought that it looked funny, but I never really wanted to pay like 15 or 17 bucks for like a book that was this small. So when I saw it in a library sale, I was like, hey, perfect time. So I picked it up, I read it. It is basically a book about test questions, and it is answers that kids or teenagers got hilariously incorrect, whether it was, you know, not on purpose or on purpose to make the haha funny joke. Anyway, the problem with this book is that I read it and it was hilarious, it was fun, I had a very good time with it, but it did exactly what I thought it was going to do, which is it was a great laugh for one time and I never really had an interest in picking it up again. So I'm not really interested in owning something that I might have enjoyed it, but I'm not really interested in rereading it. So that's why this one's in the gone pile, but I really think that it'll be a nice little surprise for whoever comes across it next. Now the next two books I'm going to do sort of as a pair because they sort of have the same origin story and the same reason why I'm letting go of them. The first one is The 14th Goldfish by Jennifer L. Holm, and the second one is Half Brother by Kenneth Opel. Now the 14th Goldfish, I actually have no idea what it's about, but Half Brother I know is about a family who I believe the parents are scientists and they adopt an 8-day-old chimpanzee to see if a baby chimp can be like assimilated to a family, and basically thinking it's a person and thinking that it is like the actual brother of their actual kid. But then the experiment ends and they have to send the chimp back, but the actual human son is fighting to get the chimp back into the family because he also feels as though this chimp is his real brother. Now, what these have in common is that these were both books for the middle school version of Battle of the Books, which is an interlibrary trivia competition in which a bunch of libraries get together teams of kids, either middle schoolers or high schoolers, and then they all have to read the same books, and then at the end of the summer there is a big old trivia competition centering around the books that they have all read. Now, me and my best friend Sophie over at Sophie's Book Nook were the high school coaches for the middle school team for a couple years in a row, and this one was one of the books, I think the first year we were helping coach, I want to say, which is why I was interested in reading it, to sort of have a little bonding thing with the team. And then this one was a book from like many years before I started coaching, but I was like, hey, why not do a little Battle of the Books backstory, see what the team has read in years past. Now, this one just holds pretty much no interest for me. I think it just seems like a little bit young for me. Not to say that like middle grade is too young as an entire genre, because there are middle grade books that I love and adore and that I would still reread to this day, or new ones that I would read. But this one in particular just seems like it's a little bit young. I wouldn't really connect to it. It's not really for me. And then for this one, while it seems interesting and it's one that I would probably like to get 2 years down the road, it is one that I've owned for many years now, and I just can't see myself picking it up anytime soon, or even rebuying it whenever I did want to read it years down the line. It's probably one that I would end up getting from the library, so might as well not have it take up space on my shelves in the meantime. Now, this one is a bit of a tragedy just because it's been a staple of sort of my room for years and years since I was a very small little child, and it is the Nancy Drew books, numbers 9 through 16. When I was a little wee baby youngster, it was not that long after I moved here. I think I was probably 7 or 8. I had a neighbor that was a little bit younger than me, and we both decided that we liked Nancy Drew, and we had what we called the Nancy Drew Club, and we were gonna solve neighborhood mysteries. The only problem being there weren't any neighborhood mysteries, and she actually legitimately liked and read Nancy Drew, and I liked the concept of Nancy Drew but had never read Nancy Drew, and I've still never read a Nancy Drew book to this day. Anyway, point being, she had this boxed set and she was like, hey, here you go, here are these to read since we're in the Nancy Drew club that we have together. And I just never read them, and I've had them in my room since I was like 8. So I don't think I'm gonna read them anytime soon. Plus, when I do eventually down the line read the Nancy Drew books, I still love the concept of Nancy Drew. I still want to read the Nancy Drew books. I do want to start from the beginning, and I do still have the first and second book, I believe, in my possession in nice, snazzy hardback editions. So sad to part with this one, but it's gotta happen. I just think that somebody would appreciate it a little bit more than I would. Now, these next 4 I'm going to sort of pair together because, again, similar stories. The first is Cousins in the Castle by Barbara Brooks Wallace. Second is The King in the Window by Adam Gopnik. Next we have The Dark Hills Divide by Patrick Carman. And finally, Found by Margaret Haddix. All of these books were given to me by my brother Q over at Professor Q's College of Books here on BookTube a couple years back when he was doing his book clean out, and at the time I couldn't imagine doing any sort of book unhaul, and I was like, what? How could you? And I was like, yes, I'll save those poor books you want to get rid of. That sounds so good. Why would you want to get rid of them? Only to realize a couple years later when I was doing my book clean out that I didn't really want to read them. I just didn't want him to get rid of them. And again, these are all middle grade books, and I'm a little more selective when it comes to middle grade just because I'm really into excellent writing. And I'm not saying that middle grade can't be written excellently, because it absolutely can, but a lot of the times it will be written a little more plainly or a little more simply because it's intended for a younger audience. I'm sure I would have loved any of these books when I was a younger human being. However, now I just don't really want to give that much time into books that have only like a semi-interesting concept to me, on top of them being written for an age group that I'm pretty iffy about to begin with. So the next book I have here is Silence by Rebecca Fitzpatrick. Funny story on this one. This was a discard book at my library, and my young adult librarian asked me at the time, hey, do you want this? And I was like, yeah, sure. Not realizing that, one, this is the third book in a series. The first one is Fallen, and the second one is Hush Hush, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they're fairly popular, not popular, well-known YA series. But second of all, it's a terribly reviewed YA series. Nobody wants that. I've heard that it is basically gender-bent Twilight. Don't even actually know if it's gender-bent Twilight. No. I think it's Twilight with angels instead of vampires. I think that's what it is. But I've heard pretty much nothing but bad things about this series. So after I found out those two separate factors, I was like, I certainly don't need to own the third book in a series, and I certainly don't even want to read a series that's so poorly reviewed. So, done, out of my life. The next one is Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer. However, it is the graphic novel version. Now, I have never read Artemis Fowl, but I want to read Artemis Fowl. However, I do not want my first introduction to Artemis Fowl to be the graphic novel version because, of course, it is abridged and adapted for the comic book version. Plus, besides that, I flipped through it and the art style is not really one that strikes my fancy, and for me to enjoy a graphic novel, the art is as important as the writing and the story. So even after I read Artemis Fowl in its original series format, I figure I probably won't be picking up the graphic novel version, and I figure somebody else will enjoy this more than my shelves will enjoy holding it. These next two are also sort of a pair, so I'm going to present them together. The first one is How to Draw, presented by Wizard, and the other one is the Big Wizard Covers book. Now these were both given to us for free, pretty much at the door at 2010 Big Apple Comic-Con, if I'm not mistaken. These both seem like great books if you're more into the subject matter, but I've never read a Wizard magazine in my life, and I'm not super interested in the history of Wizard or Wizard covers or comic book drawing. At least I'm not enough into comic book drawing to read a book about it, especially since I don't really work well with learning drawing from books. So, you know what they gotta do? They gotta go. A sort of follow-up to those two is You Can Do a Graphic Novel by Barbara Slate. When I was a kid, I went to a children's program at the library that was hosted by the author of this book, and it's basically a book sort of formatted for kids in an easy to understand way about drawing and plotting and doing the story for a graphic novel or a comic book. But again, even though it holds the good memory of that program, just like those other two books held the good memory of going to Big Apple Comic-Con, I'm not really interested in making or doing or writing for or drawing for a comic book, so this isn't really the book to suit me or my needs at the moment. Now this last one is the one I'm most disappointed, I think, to let go of, and it is Cadaverant Queen by Alyssa Whitney. Now this is one of the few in the pile that I have actually read. The thing is, I just didn't like it as much as I wanted to. I really wasn't a fan of it, but I was so disappointed because I actually met the author before buying this book. She was at an event at a local comic book shop selling her most recent comic book series, which I read and I loved, so I was super hyped for this book to come out a couple of months following that event, and my brother bought it for me and I read it and I just wasn't into it, and it's so disappointing because she is so nice. She was such a good, kind, warm soul. She sat there and talked to us for like 20 minutes talking to us about writing and other things like that. She was so cool, and this is a Frankenstein retelling, so that's also super neat, and it's female. The doctor who creates Frankenstein is female, and she's a doctor who was a student at a college, and she is one of, I don't remember if she's the only female doctor at the college or if she's one of the very few, but I thought it was so cool as a concept, and it really holds up as a concept. I just wasn't a super fan of the execution, unfortunately. I'm really sad about it, but I'm not writing off Alyssa Whitney as an author because, like I said, I loved her comic book series, which is called Mystic You. This one in particular wasn't for me, and that's okay. But that's sort of the story on that one. Alright you guys, so that is it. That is my first unhaul. If you count the Nancy Drew books as one book, which I'm going to since it's a box set, I got rid of 16 books in total. I'm really proud of myself for gaining the ability to let go of books that I know aren't for me or that I know I will just never get to. At any rate, I would love to hear from you guys if you enjoyed this video, if you would like to see more unhauls in the future, if I could possibly get myself to get rid of more books. That was me looking around at all my shelves. I just realized you don't really know the shelf placement of my room, but I do, and I was looking at all of them individually. Anyway, would love to hear from you guys if you've read any of the books that I am unhauling, if you liked them, if you didn't like them, if you're doing an unhaul soon, how you feel about unhauls in general, any of it, all of it, please leave it in a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, do not hesitate to give it a thumbs up. Do not hesitate to subscribe for more content coming soon, and I will see you in the next video. Bookish Badger, signing off.